Let's catch up with Gemma Tognini on the desk here with me from GT Communications. Good to see you, Gemma back in town, and Caroline D'Arisso, Sky News host, still in the West. Great to catch up with both of you. Let's start with you, Caro. I've got to get your thoughts on this. The fact that the Gazan refugees that came so quickly to Australia are now looking at applying, a lot of them for asylum here and permanently staying in Australia. Well, surprise, surprise, we all knew that would happen. That's why there's so concerns about such quick decisions when they couldn't possibly have done proper checks when it comes to security and the like.
Absolutely right. And look, some of these were approved on incredibly short notice. And I think the community has the right to ask the questions of whether this was all done properly prior, obviously, to those people coming to Australia. And of course, anyone, once they land in Australia, can make a claim for asylum. There's absolutely nothing stopping them there. But then that's when there becomes that extra cost again to the community, because these claims need to be processed. If those claims fail, if they end up in court, then there's obviously the fees and additional costs that's associated with that. And I think if you do the job properly the first time around, it decreases the chance of these sorts of additional costs and this additional time coming up. We understand it's over 2 years potential time to process these claims, and I'm not sure that the Australian community is necessarily too happy with that as an outcome.
Yeah, look, it's an extraordinary case. It's going to be interesting to hear the arguments here, because you're usually fleeing persecution. Now, obviously, they're fleeing a war. Now, who could blame anyone for wanting to get out of Gaza at the moment? But then, where's the persecution coming from? Is it from their elected government of Hamas? It's a bizarre case.
Well, I think it's fair to say that it could more than likely coming from Hamas, but we also know that many Gazan Palestinians voted for Hamas, and the polling that is done by various organisations throughout the Middle East points to still a strong level of support for the terror organisation. And we must remind Australians, not that we should need to remind them, that Hamas is a prescribed terror organisation in this country and most others around the world. Look, Caroline's quite right. The Australian electorate deserves to know this is a government that promised transparency, has delivered nothing but secrecy since day one.
Sure has. Now, when you talk about global leadership on this thing, you despair when you think about Joe Biden. I just have to show you this. You may have seen it earlier, but we're all, of course, focused on the next steps in the Middle East and the talk of an Israeli and IDF ground incursion into Rafah, where, of course, Hamas terrorists are now located. Listen to the president last week talking about his advice to Israel.
And I made it clear to Israelis, don't move on Haifa. It's just not, I mean, anyway, I just...
Don't move on Haifa. Now, let's just chuck up a map here for you so you understand the geography. Rafah, of course, is in Gaza, right at the south of Israel's occupied territories there. Haifa is in Israel. It's an Israel port city right at the north of Israel. Gemma, he's just got Rafah in Gaza confused with Haifa, the port city of Israel.
I mean, we all have made Biden jokes in the last wee while, but this is actually incredibly concerning on so many levels. Who's running the joint? It's not him. It's him on a bad... If he's woken up from a nap, we're lucky, but my goodness, that's incredibly concerning at a time where... And it's not just concerning for the obvious reasons. This is a fraught situation in the Middle East. Everyone's talking about escalation, de-escalation. There are 130 lives still... I don't think they're all alive, Chris, and I wrote about that on the weekend.
Oh, yeah, tragically.
There was 130 American citizens. If there are 130 Australian citizens, UK citizens, it would be a completely different situation. So there are multiple levels on which that piece of footage is incredibly concerning.
Well, tragically, though, from America's point of view, some of the dead already are US citizens, and some of those still unaccounted for are US citizens, so you think you'd be more focused on it. Let me bring it back to domestic politics and the nuclear debate. And there have been reports around today that inside the coalition there's argument about where the nuclear power stations might be sited in this country. Apparently some MPs saying they don't want them in their backyard, which is a little awkward for the coalition when it comes to their behind-the-scenes negotiation. Here's the Nationals leader today on this topic.
There's no tension at all. There may be a few that want to try and make hay for their own personal gain, but our party room,
that's tension,
is the
isn't it?
first party room to support. No, there's no tension. The tension is when you don't have a majority, and there is a clear majority of our party room that wants nuclear power.
Fair enough. There's no tension, but there are some who are trying to make hay or make gain for themselves. Sounds like there's tension, Caro.
No, it's just a robust conversation, and we're allowed to have that inside
Yes.
the coalition. And I absolutely welcome it. I mean, the first thing, after all, is we got to get rid of the moratorium. We got to be allowed to talk about this. But as far as where any of these locations go, obviously there's going to be discussion about it at a federal level, but you need a huge amount of buy-in from the states. You know, but there'll be jobs attached to this. There'll be energy security attached to this. And maybe after, you know, a couple of summers where you can't turn the aircon on, people might think differently about replacing, you know, an old coal-fired power station with a nuclear power station, which, you know, or whatever it is and however they go about doing it, to ensure that people can afford to pay their electricity bills and they can turn it on when they absolutely need it.
Yeah, look, I think it's a debate they really shouldn't be having. It's kind of obvious where these things should go if we get to have them. You're right. You've got to talk about getting rid of the prohibition first and work out the rest of it later. But we'll see how that debate plays out. Gemma, I've got to get your views on what's happening at Tesla. Apparently, one of the issues with electric vehicles, they cost a bit much. You've suggested before there might be some tax advantages in those costs.
Let's just not talk about it.
Because they're not selling as many, they're dropping the price. Well, that could be good for consumers. Is it good for Tesla?
I got a cheap one. Go on, second-hand.
Yeah, how you going selling a second-hand Tesla? Does anyone want one?
Market slow, Christopher. Market slow. Look, what can I say? World's least enthusiastic Tesla driver.
You know they explode in flames every now and then. There could be an accident.
I'm not kidding. I was charging mine today and it was making a funny noise, and I was like, I'm just going to go upstairs and do my grocery shopping, and if it bursts into flames, so be it. Look, the free marketist in me goes, it is what it is, right? Like, it is the market telling the manufacturer what it thinks, and I cannot. Like, I don't think it's good or bad or... I mean, it's obviously not great.
It also says they've been charging too much so far.
Of course they've been charging too much, because everybody except for me has been like, oh, I'm so virtuous. I did not buy my car to be virtuous. I bought it because I'm a dodgy commercialist. But not dodgy, I'm very, very ethical. But my point is, it's part of I think, the natural correction around this technology that is not all it's cracked up to be, that is flawed. The infrastructure here is undercooked. And I've said this before, I've said this to you. If you're the person who drives in and around the city and doesn't go into the country and has the capacity to charge your car at home, fantastic. But let's not pretend that the fossil fuels and the minerals and everything that goes into a Tesla are generated ethically or in a green manner, because they're not.
And don't do what Gemma did and buy one when you got nothing to charge it.
Do not do it. Do not do it. I drank the Kool-Aid.
You can bring in the used car ad for us next week, Gemma. Thanks for joining us. Caroline D'Urso as well.